All right, you take out your Bibles for me. All right, so we are in James chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. We're getting close to the end of James here. So, some pretty cool stuff that I want to talk about tonight. Just a reminder about who James is writing to. He's writing to the early Christians, and it's believed that the early Christians that he's writing to are the ones that were once Jews. So he's not writing to like the Gentiles, so the people who weren't of Jewish faith. It's more directed at the early Christians who were once Jews. So he is talking to believers. He's reminding believers about how they should act, what they need to watch out for. And so tonight, we're going to talk about 3 dangers that James is warning us about in this particular chapter, in these particular verses. So there's a lot to unpack. I'm going to move as fast as I can. We'll get through as much as we can, but if we don't get done, it's okay. We're going to touch on some pretty cool and interesting things right off the bat. So let's look at those 3 dangers. So the first one, if you go to that first slide there for me, I guess it's actually slide number 2. So the first warning that we have is against the love of money. So in verses 1 through 6. So let's read through that together. In chapter 5, verses 1 through 6, it says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries which are coming upon you." Starts off pretty heavy duty. Like James, will hit you square in the mouth with what he's trying to get across. "Your riches have rotted, and your garments have become moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver have rusted, and their rust will be a witness against you, and will consume your flesh like fire. It is in the last days that you have stored up your treasure. Behold, the pay of the laborers who mowed your fields, and which has been withheld by you, cries out against you, and the outcry of those who did the harvesting has reached the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. You have lived luxuriously on the earth and led a life of wanton pleasure. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and put to death the righteous man. He does not resist you." Wow. All right, let's look at our second danger. That next one there. He's talking to us about the love of money. The next one, he's talking to us about complaining. Anybody in here ever complained about anything? Mr. Price, you ever complained about anything? How would Mrs. Price respond to that? Okay. All right, so 7 through 11, let's read that. Okay. "Therefore be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil, being patient about it until it gets the early and late rains. You too be patient." I'm putting emphasis on a certain word. We'll talk about it later. "Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Do not complain, brethren, against one another, so that you yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing right at the door. As an example, brethren, of suffering and patience, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. We count those blessed who endured. You have heard of the endurance of Job and have seen the outcome of the Lord's dealings, that the Lord is full of compassion and is merciful." All right, he gives us one more warning of a danger. Let's look at that one. Swearing an oath. So we're going to talk about what that means, but that's in verse 12. It says, But above all, my brethren, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or with any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no, no, so that you may not fall under judgment. All right, a lot of stuff in there, but There's a lot for us to take in. So stick with me, okay? Deal? All right. Let's go to that first danger, the love of money. So in verse 1, he says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you." I don't like that. Doesn't sound like a lot of fun, right? You're going to cry. You got misery that's coming your way for being rich. So what's he talking about here? So if you go to the next slide for me, this was directed at those who had become rich in unethical ways and used their money selfishly. So a little bit about who these people are. If you'll go to the next slide for me. Yeah. No. It says, it's slide number 7. You got a slide 7? No. Okay. All right. We'll figure it out. So he's talking to the people who became rich in unethical ways. So the people here he's talking about or talking to were early Christians who were once Jews. Anybody remember what we learned a couple months ago when we went through Genesis? You remember way back in Genesis, it's at the front of the Bible, right? There was a covenant made between God and who? Do we remember? Abraham. Yeah, and what did God promise Abraham about nations, and that he would basically, he's blessing the children of God, the Israel, right? Hey, there it is. So these folks are still enjoying that blessing. That covenant's still in place. And so the people of God have prospered. Some of the people who James is talking to right here have taken advantage of that situation. So if you'll see there in some of those verses, it's talking about they withheld wages from people. They loved money more than they loved other people. They withheld money from people that they had contracts with or who worked for them, who were doing things for them that they had promised to give them money for doing, and they didn't do it. So they were unethical. They didn't do what was right. So James is acting as a prophet in this particular passage to these people who have placed money or the love of money above all else. He's telling them judgment is coming. Judgment from who? God. All right. And so have you ever heard this verse in 1 Timothy 6 through 10? It says, money is the root of all kinds of evil, right? Is that what it says? What does it say? It's right up there. The love of money. Money's not a bad thing. It's the love of money. So that's what James is reminding us of. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. Money can rule over you. There are people who sacrifice relationships for money. There are people who sacrifice their health for money. They sacrifice everything in their life just to get more money. James is talking about here in this particular passage that, what does he say about the money itself, the coins and stuff? It what? You remember what it said? It rusts, right? So all those things that we consume, all those things that we buy, what happens to it? They're gonna come with you. You can't take it with you, and they're going to rust. They're gonna tear up. So like you get a new pair of really expensive shoes. 6 months later, you either grown out of them or you can't. The bottoms are all worn out, right? So, yeah, thank you. Okay, you're right. All right, so the love of money. what money does to us is it can take us over. It can control us. So let's look at what a healthy relationship with money looks like. So a couple of things that we can take away from this. You don't have to write out the whole verse there, but the first primary thing you need to understand about money, a godly relationship with money, is that you live within your means. What does that mean? What does it mean to live within your means? Don't spend more money than you have. So if you're paid $500 a week, don't spend $600 a week on stuff. Okay? That sounds pretty easy, right? Well, that makes a lot of sense. But a lot of people, myself included, have fallen into spending more than what they make. And that's not godly. So in 1 Timothy 6, again, 6 through 12, but godliness with contentment is great gain. What does it mean to be content? What does it mean to be content? To be satisfied with what you got. So yeah, it's cool to get new stuff. But be real honest, you don't need new stuff all the time. All right? So there we go. Live within your means. First part of it, having a healthy view of money. Can we go to the next one, please? Eliminate debt. What's debt? Anybody know what that is? What you got? He raised his hand. I got him right here. Yeah, say it loud.
When you owe someone money.
When you owe somebody money. Okay. So there's lots of debt that's out there. So maybe your parents probably have some debt. They may have a car payment. They may have a house payment. They borrowed money so that you could live in the house that you're in. That is debt. They're paying the bank back for that. Hey, hang with me. I know we're doing a lot of interaction, but hang with me on some of the other parts, okay? So let's look at that. Proverbs 22:7 says, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender." So what does that mean? That if you borrow money from somebody, from a bank or wherever, you're beholden to them. You have a contract with them that says, I will pay you whatever that payment is on whatever date. And if you don't pay, you know what they do? They come and they take that thing back. Whether that's your house or it could be the car that you had, they'll come take it back. Romans 13:8 says, "Owe no one anything except to love each other, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the laws." So there's a lot of, I guess, debate over this in terms of whether Christians should take out loans and that sort of thing. I think there's a guy out there named Dave Ramsey who would tell you, don't ever take out a loan, pay cash for everything, except for maybe like your house. But it's best not to be beholden to a lender. When y'all turn 18, you're going to get in the mail, more than likely, credit card applications. If you're on a college campus, there will be people on college campuses that will offer you a fun t-shirt for signing up for a credit card. Does anybody know how credit cards work? Yeah. So it's just like free money, right? You use that and just swipe that thing, get whatever you want, right? All right, so that's not how it works. It's not how it works. So if I use a credit card, if I'm a college freshman, I probably don't have much of what you would call credit, so they're probably only going to let me borrow like maybe $1,500, $2,000, something like that. So like if I get that money and I'm like, wow, I can go spend this, and I go spend all that money on, I don't know, I get a new computer, and then
Coca-Cola.
so you go spend all that money. 30 days later, I'm getting a bill for that $2,000, right? Plus, if I can't pay it right then, they charge this stuff called interest. So for the pleasure of using their money, they're going to charge you to use that money. So be careful. Okay, I'm telling you that now. Hopefully you'll remember when somebody puts that fancy t-shirt in front of your face and you can say, no, that's not a good idea. All right, so eliminate debt. Don't be beholden to a lender. All right, our last one for a healthy view of money. Give generously. Like we've already said, you can't take all this money with you. So to have a healthy view of money, a godly view of money, who's all the money belong to anyway? God. No, the money comes from God. God provides all the money. So he asks us to give that money. Matthew 6:19 through 21 says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy. So like what James was saying, if you're hoarding that money, you're hoarding those goods, it's all going to deteriorate. It's going to rust. But if you're storing up for yourselves treasures in heaven, moth and rust can't get to those things. And he also says there, thieves can't break in and steal when your treasure's in heaven. But if you got all your money hoarded here on earth, you got it all stuck up underneath your mattress, or maybe you've got it all invested in some kind of weird stock market scheme, it can all go away just like that. But if you're giving generously, like you all did tonight, giving to the offering that goes to help the people in Lebanon, to provide for their needs, to provide them with the ability to do outreach, with to get equipment, whatever they need to spread the gospel, that is storing up treasures in heaven. All right. So for best money advice that I could probably give you that was given to me, there's a couple of points here. I don't have a slide for this, but something my dad told me a long time ago. My dad did not make a lot of money. He did not have a job that paid, tremendous salary. He worked at the same place, doing the same thing for about 50 years. And I think he told me one time that he got one raise throughout that entire 50-year career. But my dad lived within his means. He didn't spend more money than he made. He eliminated debt, and he gave generously. And what he told me was this: tithe 10%. So whatever you make, give 10% of that back to God. It's God's in the first place. Give him the 10% back to your church, to further the kingdom. You get 90%. So give your tithe of 10%. Save 10% of what you make. Save it. Save some of your money. I know when you get money, I'm like this sometimes. I get a little bit of money. Boy, I want to go out and I want to buy stuff. Some of you aren't like that. But I know for me, maybe I'm just talking to myself right now, I want to spend money. And that's okay, but you need to save some. Tithe 10%, save 10%. And then lastly, spend less than you make. And that might require some sacrificing. That might mean that you don't buy new cars, but you buy a car that's a couple years old with a little bit of miles on it, but you save yourself thousands of dollars, and it has all the same stuff on it. Maybe it means that you don't get this year's edition of whatever phone. Maybe you get last year's. Maybe it means that you don't get the new whatever it is the day that it comes out, Maybe you wait a little while. You're going to have to make decisions like that. So maybe some of you have a bank account now. I don't know. But I would encourage you, when you're old enough, to do that. Start saving money now. I work in an industry. That's great. So I work in an industry that helps people to save for their goals, either to buy a house, to retire, to pay for their kids to go to school. And I've learned a lot over the 20 years that I've worked there. One of the things that I've learned is that if I had been able to go back to when I first started working, which some of y'all will start working soon if you haven't already, to be able to put away more of that money in an account or in some way to be able to build up that savings. So there's lots of ways to do that. Your parents can help you with that, but start saving money now. Have that healthy relationship with money, because like we said, money can destroy relationships. Money can control you, can dominate your life, or money can be a tool that you can use to bless other people if you live in a relationship with it the way God has commanded. All right, so let's go to our next warning. Our next warning is about complaining. So if we go back to when we were reading verses 7 through 11, there was a certain word that I emphasized quite a bit throughout that. What was that word? Patience. Yeah. So case in point, patience. So who's patient in here? Who's patient? Are you? Okay. All right. So let me give you an example. So this happened tonight. My main man, Tim, and his sweet mustache were out there on the grill. He's cooking up some dogs for everybody. He's getting the hot dog water off of the hot dogs so that they can be consumed. And somebody kept coming up to him and like, hey, when are you going to open up the JWAC? Hey, when are you going to open up the JWAC? Hey, when are you going to open up the JWAC? And Tim said, I'm doing something right now. It's not time yet. And then 2 seconds later, hey, is it time yet? No. So case in point, patience is important. And what James is talking about in these verses is being patient with other people and not complaining about your circumstances. So going back to Genesis again, Israel was out there in the wilderness, right? They'd been promised all these things, and they were going to the promised land, and they got out of bondage. They were no longer in slavery. But what did they do after they were out of slavery and they were walking around? God's providing for all their needs, but what did they still do? They complained. You're putting the puzzle together, and I appreciate it. So the same can be said of us. We know what God has done for us. If you're a Christ follower, if you believe in Jesus and you know about that relationship, you have that relationship with Him, He has transformed you. You're going through that sanctification process. You know what you were and what you are now. You know that God has been faithful to you. He has provided for you. Did you know that in this room, if you're in this room, you live in the United States of America, you are some of the richest people in the world. Statistically speaking, if you were living in the United States, I think you're in like the top 5% richest people in the world. So you are blessed. God has provided for you. God is faithful to you. He's made a way for you. And there's individual stories too. So maybe your family went through a hardship and God healed somebody in your family. Maybe God didn't heal that person, but he showed you grace and mercy throughout that. Maybe you had a hard time, a relationship with a friend or a family member, and God healed that relationship. Maybe your family didn't have the things that they needed, and then all of a sudden what you needed showed up. That was God. So God has done something for each of you individually that you can remember. James is telling us in these verses, remember what God has done for you, what he has brought you through, and his faithfulness. Maybe you haven't had a hard time yet. Maybe everything's everything's cool. Hardest thing you got to deal with is maybe your iPhone doesn't charge properly and it doesn't last very long. And that's the hardest thing that you got going on. I'm serious. Stick with me. Stick with me. I want to tell you this, though. Life is hard. Life is hard. But God is good. He is gracious. And he will see you through. Especially the very serious stuff. And so, if you're a Christ follower, you can hold on to that. Or you can come to Wednesday nights. You can hear stuff. You can hear an old guy like me talk about God and all that sort of thing. Listen. You can hear me talk about that, and you can kind of whatever, dude. And you can choose to not take any of this on. You can choose not to listen. You can choose to not pay attention. But I'm going to tell you, when the hard times come, you're not going to have anything to stand on. So it's up to you, and that's what James is reminding us of. So we can complain about our circumstances, like the people of Israel did, or we can remember what God has done for us and know that he's going to do something like that again or something even greater. All right, last one. So there's a verse about biblical patience in Galatians. I encourage you to read that. It's in chapter 5. It's the fruit of the Spirit. You've all probably heard that, probably familiar with the song. I won't sing that. All right, the next one, there's another verse in Proverbs 14:29. He who is slow to wrath has great understanding, but he who has a hasty temper exalts folly. So if you're quick to anger, if you're not patient, life's going to be real hard. That's something I have to deal with all the time. It takes me a little bit to get worked up, but when I do, it's bad news. So you can choose how you're going to react to situations. So Proverbs, James, Galatians, they're all giving us wisdom on how we should approach this life. So how can you be patient with all these crazy people around you? There's all these people that are making me impatient. Well, it goes back to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. If you remember when I was here, maybe you don't. If you go to the next slide, you have to go through, you have to be transformed. You have to allow God into your heart and to change you. Because if you don't, you're going to continue to complain, to be impatient. There's another verse, I think, on the next slide for Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed, the renewal of your mind. So only people that can renew your mind, the only person that can do that is God. The last thing I got is just say yes or no. Let your yes be yes or your no be no. That's not what we're talking about. So what James is telling us to do. There are two things. Stick with me. Stick with me. This is super important. So I need you with me, because this is something that lacks in our society today. And if you can get this, it'll help you. Because I can tell you this. If you're not trustworthy, if you are found to be a liar, that's one of the worst characteristics that you can have. If people cannot trust the words that are coming out of your mouth because you don't do what you say you're going to do, or you lie all the time, you're going to miss out on opportunities. You're going to miss out. You're going to destroy relationships. You're going to have no credibility. You're going to lose jobs. You're going to lose friends. And lying all the time takes a lot of energy. So what James is telling us is, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. Say what you mean, do what you say. And the last slide is just another word, is have integrity. So integrity means do what you say you're going to do. So James has told us a couple of things as Christians, as the early Christians, and I think it definitely applies to us, to have a healthy relationship with money. Don't let money determine who you are or control your life. Be patient with people. Don't complain. Remember what God has done for you in those hard times. And lastly, be trustworthy. Have integrity about yourself. Will you be able to do all these things all the time on your own? No. But that's why we have a Savior. If you could do all this on your own all the time, there is no need for Jesus. There's a sign down the road at another church that says, "You are enough." I'm afraid to tell you, you are not enough. You need Jesus. You need Jesus. You can't do this life without Him. That's what James is reminding us.